and we're going to spotlight her. Okay, Peggy, take it away.
Okay, I will have to share screen here. So
Right.
share and this, and I will share. And I need to move this over here and get this to slideshow.
It's
Uh,
down in the bottom tray.
from here. Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
This is always
Yippee.
a great accomplishment for me to get to this. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you again for being with us tonight and for joining us for the second session of Volunteers First. Um, I want to, as usual, get started by giving credits to the four people who have made this really possible for me. And one is just quickly Cheryl Blakely, former president of AAUW Palm Springs branch, who inspired the program many years ago. Barry Otland, an author and consultant with AAUW California, who enlightened our understanding of the why and the how of volunteer leadership, the importance of engaging the head, heart, and hand of volunteers, and consented to our using his book for this program. Sigmund Morantz, of course, our AUW branch leadership development chair, who is endlessly patient and never allowed me to give up, and to Gloria Holland, Salem branch member, for her invaluable narrative coaching. As you all know, Volunteers First is an awareness program. It's designed specifically for leaders of volunteers to address AAUW's declining membership, engagement, and leaderships. We seek Volunteers First seeks serious consideration of AAUW leaders to change their primary focus from administering the branch, filling positions, and assigning tasks to members to first building and facilitating relationships among members. Hence the name, the title, Volunteers First. There are four effective interchangeable best practices or ways for leaders and members to build and facilitate relationships. They are care, connect, support, and recognize. Success implementing each depends on AAUW leaders knowing and respecting what each member volunteers hopes to gain or get in return for being an AAUW member while working for the cause. So, with that in mind, I think it's important to just take a few minutes here now to refresh our memories about the Volunteers First basics that we covered in the first session. In the first session, we learned we're not alone. Nonprofit volunteer organizations worldwide have been facing a steady decline in members and volunteers for over 20 years. But we did the best we could, as did they. They adopted, and so did we, the business leadership model. Need to have somebody mute their microphone, please. They adopted the business leadership model for recruitment, retention, productive engagement, and leadership. It was familiar and it made sense at the time. AAUW has had some excellent success in some of the areas using this business leadership model because for these areas it is appropriate. Accountability to donors and members is good, and we used it effectively when developing an array of engaging community programs that have measurably advanced and empowered women and girls throughout the country. But with all of this success, we can't figure out why membership is declining. It's puzzling because our cause is one of such great passion to so many women. And try as we may, we have not been able to get ourselves out of this pickle. We learned in our last session that research has always been the basis for external AAUW programs. So, in 2022, Sandy Gabe, former AAUW of California president, and her board, they made a bold decision to research our dilemma internally. Former AAUW California members were surveyed and asked, why they dropped their branch membership. Particular attention was given to answers of those who had been leaders and or actively engaged. Other than moving or illness, a significant number said they left AAUW because they felt unwelcome, disconnected, and or just because they or just became disinterested in participating, even for the cause. That's when we were challenged. After reading Barry Outland's book, Engaging the Head, Heart, and Hands of Volunteers, and meeting with him by Zoom, we began to understand why we were losing members and how to make an effective leadership correction. Barry had us look inward for our volunteer motivators. And interestingly enough, they were the same or almost the same as the ones here on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Once done, Barry suggested our collective intrinsic motivators were likely the same motivators as those of most of our members. He then suggested all AAUW leaders needed to do was focus on satisfying those intrinsic needs, those motivators, what members want to gain from volunteering with us, and then just modify our leadership model accordingly. So we looked around to see if there was any research that might validate and support what Barry's theory is. The first was done in 2020 by South American volunteers. South America, they asked other volunteers all over the world, what keeps you coming back? And the results were astounding. Universally, the volunteers said they do so to satisfy their intrinsic needs, the needs that money can't buy or jobs can't satisfy. The need to altruize, to socialize, to learn, to self-actualize. These are the categories. The conclusion was simple. Leaders of volunteers can sustain their organizations if they first and foremost focus on the intrinsic needs of volunteers. The administrative needs of the branch, being secondary, will be easier and happen more naturally if they do this. In summary, what we learned in the first session is volunteerism is an affair of the heart. If leaders here tonight learn nothing else from these sessions, remember this: fulfilling the members' intrinsic motivations for volunteering is what touches their heart. Fulfillment drives their choices for volunteering, and fulfillment or joy is what sustains an AAUW member's passion for serving. The heart you see here represents this newfound awareness. This revelation gave us pause. In the process of trying to empower and advocate for equity for other women, have we, the AAUW mother leaders, been treating our members more like employees and unintentionally neglecting to nurture them properly as volunteers? To sustain our AAUW mother tree, the research suggests we need to ensure our member volunteers' intrinsic needs, the needs that money or work cannot provide, the needs they unconsciously hope to gain as an AAUW member, are nurtured first. In 2023, Australians also studied volunteerism on a worldwide basis to determine the most effective leadership practices for leader volunteers, practices that would increase volunteer engagement, retention, and leadership. The results of the volunteer study were successful leaders of volunteers made building and facilitating relationships their number one priority. And the Australians further listed the most effective ways to build and facilitate relationships are to care, connect, support, and recognize. While we've been We've been going through them in detail in session 1 and now session 2 as if they're steps. They are, in fact, interconnected. So very briefly on care, because we covered this in session 1 in great detail. The first way to build and facilitate relationships is to show you genuinely care about each member as a person. In the first session, we discussed care in detail. Generally, care means personally getting to know each member, talking in person and learning what motivates each member to volunteer, what interests and motivated and activities each member brings each member satisfaction and joy. Learn by asking what each member hopes to gain intrinsically by being an AAUW member and engaging for our cause. Also in the first session, we discussed the second way to build and facilitate relationships, which is to connect with each other, basically, each member personally, then personally connect each member to other members and activities that match their intrinsic needs and interests. Assigning administrative or job tasks to members does not build relationship, nor does it serve the purpose of putting the wants and needs of our member volunteers first. And at this stage, it certainly might not bring them joy. So tonight we're going to talk about support and recognition. We'll talk about support now. We're going to talk how research shows successful leaders of volunteers use support to build and facilitate relationships among members. Of all the behaviors found in the Australian study, I personally think support will make the biggest difference in sustaining engagement and leadership development. We've already discussed care, but if you remember, the 4 leadership behaviors are interconnected. So if you haven't already done so, at the stage where you're about to support someone who's engaging, now is the time to discover, rediscover, ask, or refresh your memory about the basics a member's intrinsic motivators. What does the member seem to enjoy when participating in mission-related activities? Generally, is the member satisfied by altruizing, socializing, learning, or self-actualizing? Your ability as an AAUW leader and member to support engaged members will be much easier if you care about their culture and generational background. So I'm going to speak about this shortly. Cultural caring means understanding and appreciating each member's unique cultural background, values, and beliefs. Having each member share about their culture creates empathy, fosters an inclusive and equitable branch environment, and increases their and your ability as a leader to effectively and comfortably support members as they become more engaged and experiment with leadership. Cultural caring means simply asking the same cultural questions a historian might ask of that person. What makes your culture unique in history? What stereotypes or erroneous assumptions have you experienced? What stereotypes or assumptions do you have about people of other cultures? How has or does your cultural background impact your life, your values, your hobbies, music, dance, food, dress, school, work, family, daily activities, socially and psychologically? How have cultural language differences impacted your life? What language or communication challenges have you experienced in your life? What type of communication do you prefer? Encourage interest groups or use circles of engagement to give members opportunities to share and learn the cultural impacts that make up each of our emotional being as members. Ask members about the uniqueness of their culture. Show curiosity and appreciation of those differences and find similarities. AAUW branches can be a safe haven for members to share deeply with each other and build lasting friendships, inspiring them to return, engage, and lead. The five-star program is another way to stimulate ideas for creating a branch environment of cultural caring and support. We're just talking about the five-star program. This year, Salem Branch began honoring Oregon women of diverse backgrounds. During Women's History Month and Oregon Black and Asian History Month, we created attractive educational and historical pieces using constant contact, sending them out to all members as part of DEI awareness. One piece announced a branch Japanese program led by a new member of Japanese descent. For the last few years, Salem Branch has made a concerted effort to collaborate and participate in community culture celebration programs like World Beat Festival and Salem Speaks. This year, a member of Ukraine descent organized a community of Ukraine cultural event with music and food. Two of our own members shared personal stories. One of her son's experiences fighting with the Ukrainians, another growing up in Moscow. These programs were done outside of the branch, in the community. Branch members offered to help NAACP with their upcoming Juneteenth celebration. We learned, just like AAUW, the NAACP needs help with their community equity events. Our offer of help was most appreciated, and instead of talking about them, we'll be joining them in a cause we share. One of our members is a Black young woman. She has not been involved in any organizations in Salem. She doesn't know them. This will be an opportunity for her. Members of the World Beat Festival and NAACP allow us to wear our t-shirts, our AAUW teachers, and distribute AAUW flyers. At last year's World Beat Festival, the Japanese woman who arranged our May Japanese program became interested in AAUW and joined our branch. She is now going to take on a leadership position, and we are ready to support her because we understand her. We understand her culture. Reaching out and offering to join our sisters with their community activities while advocating for a vision of equity helps us fulfill our missions together. Attracting diverse members is secondary, but we are confident that it's going to happen just naturally as we get to know and work with each other. As with cultural caring, generational caring begins with sharing and ends with empathy. Generational identity is grounded in traits and presences that occur in high frequency within a given group. General traits listed on this slide may or may not fit each individual personally, but the psychological and social traits and values of people are, like cultural differences, usually a real mix and sometimes seem at odds with each other. But these are general ways of the general traits that most groups are coming up with for the different generations. The values of youngsters and oldsters are shaped by the same categorical influences we, as boomers, experienced in our growing up years. Just think of it. The categories are the same. Social expectations, educational opportunities, technological growth, health, safety, economic welfare, physical and mental well-being, our parents and our own work experience, and political influences of the time. As with cultural awareness, members might find experience of youngsters to be jarringly different, and we might discover that our general knowledge of youngsters might actually be an unintended bias to overcome. Encourage interest groups, just like with culture, to use circles of engagement to give members opportunities to share and learn the how generational experiences impact a member's emotional being. As with cultural caring, generational caring begins by asking the same questions, getting to know you. What social influences did you grow up with? What were your hobbies, educational opportunities, and challenges did you face? What ways and types of communications have you experienced in your lifetime? Ah, this is a good one. What are your communication preferences? How did health issues, the pandemic, for instance, affect your social work, family, and social life? How are your work and where what are your work and family values? How are they different from your parents? And how did or will you raise your children differently than your parents raised you? How did you feel about your future growing up? How do you feel now about your hopes for the future, work, family, socially? For AAUW, what do you hope to gain? Learning the impact of each member's generational experience is just another way leaders can build and facilitate relationships and more effectively and more comfortably support members. There was a good article published this year in The Atlantic titled, Young People Want to Change the World. Nonprofits Can Help Them. The Atlantic article states, and I quote, while a majority of young people say they wish they could do more to help, according to a report from DoSomething.org, 42% of them say they don't know how to get started, unquote. Since young people in general are quite community-minded and socially conscious, it stands to reason that some of them could find a home with AAUW. Lately, we have met some of these young women while demonstrating in our community for a variety of education and equity causes while carrying our AAUW signs. Ah, yes, we are mingling with them. Yes, we are showing are up to date and part of what's going on now. In the past, we have had success reaching out to women's groups on college campuses. Why not try reaching out to help women's groups on campuses with an AAUW mission-related activity they are currently planning? It's an opportunity to mingle and gently acquaint them with AAUW as well to give them some help. AAUW Salem Branch has recently reached out to Oregon State University and Chemeketa Community College and learned volunteer organizations can actually apply to offer non-paid volunteer opportunities to students in person and online for growth in leadership. The idea of possibly offering a public policy chair is in the exploratory stage. A college student volunteer might become could become a member for free. Yes, a member would need to be there as a mentor, but this is what we're thinking. We're thinking that maybe this might be a way to help us with a leadership position and to provide growth opportunities for young women and keep our branches alive at the same time. By reaching out and mingling with younger women, leaders can more comfortably and effectively support those who become members. In this slide, I would like to introduce you to Toby Johnson. She's the president of Toby Johnson and Associates, and she gave us permission to share her summation of new research she found debunking myths about volunteers of all ages. And I would say of all cultures. What matters to volunteers is a well-run organization or activity, mutual respect, challenging work that's meaningful and makes a difference, short-term micro-volunteering opportunities, choices and control, support and training, knowing where they stand, when they're doing well, and how to do better. When offering support, don't hesitate to be assertive in assessing their satisfaction and comfort level. Listen, then act quickly to make member-specific volunteer needs satisfaction changes. Supporting each member to sustain interest, engagement, renewal is a challenge in the short run, not to mention the long run. AAUW leaders and longtime members want a magic formula we can apply now. So young members will quickly grow into a beautiful branch of engaged, energetic, and committed members who make sustaining AAUW a priority and become leaders. I really do wish I could provide you with that magic formula. But like Jerry Scott and Jim Morgman illustrated in this Zitz cartoon, there are many distractions that are barriers to a quick fix. Not to mention, most people do not like change, no matter what generation they're in. Another reality is women, young and old alike, are developing short-term attention spans and are more impatient. We want results and reward instantly. Sometimes it seems volunteer organizations are in competition with iPhones and social media for women we believe could find so much satisfaction and joy in being an AAUW member. So, anytime an engaged member does choose to show up, it's very important to support and touch their heart to better ensure they'll enjoy us on a longer date rather than sitting alone on the couch or taking a warm bath, although a warm bath is quite the competition. Circling back around to connect, leaders take time while they themselves are engaging as a speaker or with a group to observe each member. Confirm for yourself that the member is actually connected to or matched with activities that are aligned with their interests. Are they engaging with others or just sitting quietly off alone? Are they smiling or frowning? Do they stay until the end or leave early? Your observations can be used as conversation starters when touching bases with members, which is the next support step. Touching base is the single most critical, proactive, and effective support measure a leader can take to sustain a member's passion for volunteering. Touching base means slowing down enough to make time to chat with each engaged member in person, over the phone, or by Zoom. Schedule one-on-one chats when there's plenty of time to talk. Ask, how's it going? And for more in-depth conversation, express your sincere positive appreciation for the members' participation and any recent special contributions. Let the member know their serving is what matters, not how much time is served. Ask about satisfaction and fulfillment. Discuss dissatisfaction and any fulfillment barriers. Ask for feedback and suggestions, and offer alternative ways to serve. Better yet, encourage creative thinking for new ideas, programs, planning, and implementation. Growing leaders is usually a slow process of building and facilitating relationships. Growing leaders begins while supporting their engagement, not when you're getting to know someone or connecting them to activities of their interest. Prioritize your leadership development energy. Along the way, assess which engaged members appear to enjoy leadership. Assess whether or not an interested potential leader has the heart for caring, connecting, and supporting others. Spend your time and energy developing and elevating those engaged members who have the interest and ability and time to be leaders, and most importantly, who care about others. Leaders of volunteers must be able to reach out to members and genuinely care about them. Leadership positions are best left vacant rather than being filled with members who have no time or interest in leading or the heart for doing so. Empower newly engaged members to be AAUW leaders. Effective leaders create opportunities for members to take a small lead. Start by creating many small, doable lead roles with small teams for leading or co-leading activities of their interest. Create many opportunities for member volunteers to share in branch roles, programs, and active decision makings when they're interested. Then allow member volunteers to own implementation of their mission related suggestions. No time for hovering here. Effective leaders make opportunities for leadership. Sometimes it's good to just bow out of a long held position, create a vacancy, and give others an opportunity to step up. It may be slow that they do so, but it may happen. My rule of thumb is say how long you'll stay in a leadership position the day you assume that responsibility. For me, it's 3 to 4 years at the most, and never in the same role twice. Empower and challenge all AAUW members to be AAUW sustainers. Periodically, ask members to brainstorm how they can personally commit to help sustain the AAUW mission and values and activities by keeping them alive in the community. These are excellent topics for circles of engagement. What is needed to make that happen for each? What areas can members focus on to increase participation, lead an activity, engage in advocacy, scholarships, sponsorships, fundraising, branch leaderships? What can they do to keep the mission alive? The fourth way leaders can build and facilitate relationships, as well as help bond them to the AAUW mission and to the organization's sustainability, is to recognize members' contributions. Barry Altland, author of Engaging the Head, Heart, and Hands of Volunteers, is here to share a favorite and most important topic of his, rethinking volunteer recognition. So, Barry, I turn this over to you, and I'm going to stop sharing right here.
Well, thank you, Peggy, and thank you, ladies, for allowing me to join you for this evening. I was thinking about what to explore during our time together. And in my mind and in my heart, I went back to the time before I was writing. I did write and publish this book in 2015, so it's been 10 years now. But in the time before that, I had been volunteering quite a bit in a number of different capacities in my own community. And I remembered one particular organization. They were planning a recognition event for their volunteers. And I remember it was a luncheon. And this luncheon had a Western theme to it. And I remembered that some of the volunteers were really excited about this luncheon. Some of the volunteers. And I certainly remember that the people who were planning the event were really excited about this luncheon. But I was not very excited about this luncheon. And I remember going through these emotions. I'm like, well, what is wrong with me? Am I broken in some way? Because I'm not excited about these activities that feel a little bit of like forced forced fun, or I don't know. I don't even know if I pinpointed my emotional view on the event, but I just knew I wasn't all that excited about it. And it was one of those moments that just really inspired me to get curious about this topic of what does it mean to really reach in and touch the heart of a volunteer, and why is recognition an important part of that formula, and how do we do it right, and candidly in organizations, how do we not do it right in some capacity. So I think it's important for us to revisit a simple truth. The simple truth is that there are only two types of motivation that exist, and let's just touch on this again. Hopefully, this is all fresh in your mind, but there's only two types that exist, and this is all tied to this recognition topic. So that intrinsic motivation that you heard Peggy mention a bit ago, that's the stuff that matters to me, the stuff that matters to you. Each of us has intrinsic motivators. We got stuff in our heart that stirs, that gets us excited about things in our lives. It's the stuff that compels us to do what we choose to do every day. And then there's these extrinsic motivators, which candidly most organizations attempt to leverage extrinsic motivation. It's an attempt that's made by somebody else to get us to do what they want us to do. And they start pulling those levers in the hopes that one of them is going to compel you to do what they want you to do. And that's that extrinsic motivation piece. And it's important for us to revisit this, because once we understand the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, and we start thinking about recognition, we must embrace that one size does not fit all. And I had to embrace this. I had to accept this for myself, that it was okay for some people to be excited about that Western themed luncheon. But it was also okay for me to not be that excited about it. In fact, I remembered that I didn't go. I didn't go because, well, there was a reason. There was a reason why I chose not to go. And it has to do with the way that intrinsic and extrinsic motivation are connected to each other. So here's a simple truth for all of us to embrace, is that extrinsic motivation, in this case, the luncheon, the Western themed luncheon, was an extrinsic motivator that was intended to fire me up, to get me excited, for me to sustain my volunteer engagement. And it just wasn't working because that extrinsic motivational factor, it would only have been effective if it was in some way connected to my intrinsic motivation. And it wasn't. In this case, the reasons why I was serving through this organization had nothing to do with getting together for lunch and wearing a cowboy hat and boots. It just completely disconnected. So I chose not to go. I'm sure that some would think that I'm a bit of a party pooper for making that choice, and I should just put on the face and go. And I've done that sometimes. I've done it a number of times in my life. But in this particular case, I said, wow, the organization, it's a swing and a miss here, because they're just failing to connect my drivers, the things that matter to me, to their efforts to recognize all of us as volunteers. And it further reminds me that there was another time I had a speaking engagement after I had published. And this organization, they were so proud to give me this framed item. That was their recognition piece, to thank me for doing work, for actually coming in and being their featured facilitator, their speaker that night. And it inspired me to write a blog, and the name of the blog was "I Was Framed," and that was my title. And it was a little play on words, and I continued to just explain that I received this frame, and candidly, the picture that was in the frame, it just didn't land with me, but the frame was really nice. So I did what I bet a few of you have done somewhere along the way. You took the goodies out of the frame, and you kept the frame, and you used the frame for a different purpose. And I likely still have it around, but that was a moment for me that really solidified this importance of getting recognition right. and making sure that the way that we're recognizing individuals is unique to them. And it's not about what we want to do to recognize somebody else, but it's what's going to really matter to the recipient of that recognition. So let's just dig into that concept just a little bit more and embrace that recognition. It's not an event. I know that often when we speak of recognition, we speak of our recognition events. Recognition is instead, it's a practice. It's a leadership practice. It's a habit. It's something that we build into our everyday leadership lives. Recognition is also not a tangible item. We often think that we need to give somebody something to recognize them. When I'd be willing to bet that many of you have trinkets and plaques and certificates and awards and ribbons that you've received somewhere along the way, and maybe you have them proudly displayed, or maybe you don't. Maybe you have them in a box somewhere or in a drawer somewhere, or possibly they even landed in the trash at some point. So all of us have these unique relationships with those tangible items, and it doesn't work for everybody. It will work for some, but it does not work for everybody. However, there is something that does work for everybody, because I believe it's essential to humanity that something that stirs in all of our hearts, we all share this, is a desire to make a difference. We want to matter. We want to be seen. We want to be included. All of these things matter to our human existence. And for me, what a great thing that a leader can do to reinforce to somebody that they have really made a difference, that they have done something, that they have said something that has changed a life in some way. And for me, that's such an easy and cost-free way to let somebody know that they are truly valued. So as we think about that, another essential truth in recognition is that if you want to see that person sustain their performance, then what you recognize in them is what they're going to continue to do. What gets recognized is what gets repeated. And if you're seeking for all of your members to have them step up and serve in meaningful ways and to really make a difference, and then when you take the time as a leader to recognize that, not with an item and not with an event, but maybe through your words, through your meaningful words, your descriptive words, where you call out something specific that that individual did that was unique to them, that made a difference to the mission, made a difference to another person, maybe even made a difference to you. And when you're able to describe that and you just reach in and you touch their heart in a meaningful way, that's what recognition is. And it happens one person at a time. And I think that's really important for us to remember, is that it's unique to us and it's unique to the individual. And I promise you, it's not the most efficient way, because doing one thing for everybody, let's face it, it's efficient, but it may not always be the most effective way. And I believe that our calling as leaders is to recognize others in the most effective way that we can. What's really going to land in their soul and really speak to them in a way that's going to say, hey, you know what? That felt so good that I want to keep doing this. This is what matters to me. And somebody in this organization, they understand that. They recognize it, and they're in a leadership capacity, and they're able to do the right things to influence the way that I choose to serve, because they're recognizing me. They see me. They know that I'm making a difference. So with that, Peggy, I'm going to turn it back over to you, and I appreciate my time with this group, and I'm willing to answer any questions. I'm going to hang out until the end of the session.
Thank you, Barry. Yeah, I think that it's just so wonderful that you are here. And most of these people, or some of them, have attended the first session, and others may have attended some other sessions. And I just want to open it up right now while we have your time for them to ask you questions to see, because I'm sure people do have questions. So I would say, let's just do that. And I'm not sure how the best way
If
to do
everybody
that.
can utilize the raise hand thing, because we've got 36 people on here and I can't see all of you. So if you have a question, go down to the bottom of your tray to the control panel and raise your hand like that. And then you'll pop to the top of the screen and we'll be able to recognize you.
In the
So,
meantime, what I thought I would do is read to you a comment that was made by our state president. And that is exactly why I don't often attend my branch meetings. It's not my social group, but I am motivated by the mission and our work around that and helping AAUW to become more sustainable via DEI work, totally intrinsic. So I thought that was an interesting comment. And just for those of you who don't know Charmin, she's a little bit of a different demographic than many of us. Charmin's a little bit younger and still working full time. And yet she's found the time to become our state president. So I think that's an important point. I'm
there are
looking
no
to,
questions.
I was
Yeah,
gonna
there
say,
are no
if you'll
questions
allow
in
me
the
to
chat.
add, that's a really bold statement for Charmin to make, and I honor her for making that because it's what a great reminder to all of us that there's stuff that stirs in each one of your hearts, and when you put it out there, especially as you build relationship with others with whom you work, and you're able to share share how you feel about those things. That for me, those are powerful. It's powerful insight to know.
Charmin commented, Barry, that no one has ever called her shy. And also there's an awesome presentation comment that I wanted you all to know about.
Thank you. Does anyone else does anyone have any questions? Feel free. I mean, now's your time. Barry's here and I'll be here next year. And so take advantage of his presence, please.
I think I saw Faye's hand raised right there.
Ah.
But Faye, before you ask your question, I have a question of you. I saw a glass of wine in your hand earlier. Did you bring it up for everybody?
We'll be
Okay.
passing it right through the Zoom,
And you
Barry.
need to unmute yourself, Faye.
Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't find the hand raise thing at the bottom. I've clicked on everything and it's not there. I just wanted to, so Charmin and I work in the same school district. And that is why I'm here today. It's all her fault. But in a good way. But I will say that when I came to the first in-person meeting, I thought the same thing. I thought these are not my people, not because they don't have the same interests that I do, but I was clearly one of the younger people in the room. I assumed that I was one of the few people that were working full time still. And I thought, I don't know that this is the place for me right now. And so I am, I just got installed as the vice president of programming because if I don't do something, I'm not going to just come and sit because I can go do that on my own time. I can, research something or, read a book or an article or whatever. And it's very similar to my sororities alumni association. We are having all of these same issues that AAUW is having. There's this huge gap between people who want to be able to do something and aren't connected to the organizations that are doing the things. And we're finding that we're having a hard time sustaining our alumni organizations because the alumni organization wants to do things the way they did it back in college. And we're not in college anymore. We need to tap into the women who are in college and bridge that gap. So I did take a few screenshots, Barry. I hope that's okay, because I couldn't write fast enough. But I really liked what you said about recognition being a habit, not an event. Did I get that right?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
And
Again, it's a trap that some organizations fall into, and there's a lot of longstanding traditions that organizations will honor. And sometimes candidly, it gets in the way of just the daily practice of
Mhm.
letting somebody know that what they did actually made a difference.
And one of the things that it made me think of also was that whether it's that statement is applicable, whether it's positive recognition or not. So if you're constantly calling out people for not coming to meetings and not doing something and not responding to emails and then they're going to continue to not. So it's hard because you're you're wanting them to do it. You're not calling them out because you think they're bad, but they still feel called out. So it's a definite mind shift of how to do it on the regular, as my niece would say, right? It's not just one meeting or just one email and it's hard to sustain. So you need to build the people deep, uh, and not just a couple people on the committee, if that makes any sense.
Faye, what is your sorority?
I'm an Alpha Phi.
Okay, very good. I actually work on professional staff for my collegiate fraternity. That is my full-time job.
Well, there you go. And what fraternity are you in?
Kappa Epsilon Teak.
Okay, all right. I won't hold that against you.
So Barry, there's a question on the chat that's, please ask some ways to determine intrinsic versus extrinsic in terms of reasons.
Yes. I hope that everybody enjoys this answer. I know that sometimes people do not, they're looking for the most efficient way, as though there's a way to gather this information. The only effective way is to just sit down and have one-on-one conversations, to really ask the open-ended questions, and then to just stop talking and listen to another person and to find out what's really going on in here. I've seen organizations that, in their attempts to be efficient, they'll put together surveys, and all data is good. So I don't demonize data when you're attempting to collect it, but to collect the intrinsic motivation and then to broaden that out and say, well, the majority of our members say this. Well, that's valuable, but the majority may not speak to the individual. So we got to go back as leaders and we build relationships. We ask the questions. We get to know somebody. We observe them. I think about even in the work environment, the type of things that somebody puts on their desk. It's speaking to what their intrinsic motivators are. And it's all part of the relationship building process. So Ruth, I saw that question pop up as well. There's not an easy way to do it. There's not a simple way to do it, but there's a meaningful way to do it. And that's how we do it, is just by getting to know somebody, asking the questions and listening and really trying to find out what stirs within them.
Thank you. That's what I would have thought, It's kind of a good way to do it. So just checking. I will be reading your book.
Yeah, that's very kind. Thank
Sharon,
you.
we've got 2 raised hands, Bev Van Sitters and Raquel
Okay,
Iverson.
I wasn't seeing hands. I was only seeing stuff in the
Okay.
chat. So thank you for pointing that out, Sigrid.
Barry,
Where's
it's
Bev?
great to see you again. I attended all 3 last year and made use of it immediately in the survey. I'm sorry, I'm a researcher, so I use it. But it's really important, even as a researcher, really getting in and pressing the hands anytime you're at the, I know everybody and you've guessed, you've got to work the room. It's like I'm being a politician. You got to work the room, especially if you're in leadership. Find out, who the people are. One of the things that I am so happy that this group gave us the slides. So what I've done with these slides is, because I'm with Glendale and we were the ones that were on life support, right? Well,
If that.
we are going strong. We're so excited. Our last 10 new members are from the ages of 35 to about 50. And they're really getting involved. Public policy, I've got 4 people ready to do public policy. So that's going to be reenacted. But one of the things is I've reshaped everything on these slides so that we can talk about Glendale community issues particularly. And so I've taken some things out of the slides to make it Glendale pertinent. And I also have our AAUW logo for Glendale on there too. Logo's important, you know, and our little QR code is in there too for the website. So always trying to do the marketing, but thanks to you, it really helped me with the board to help develop we did a board retreat last year for them to really understand where we're going and what we're doing. And you helped me as a leader. So now as a leader of this group, it's my turn to help everybody in my group take those leadership roles in charge of their committees or whatever, and just spread the word. It was so helpful, and I am indebted to you. Thank you so much.
Ooh, yeah.
Okay,
Raquel.
thanks, Bev. And Raquel, you have your hand up.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes?
Okay, great. So my name is Raquel Iverson. I'm from the Pacifica branch, and my question is for Barry. I'm a little confused about the difference between engagement and recognition. So we've used both of these terms. To me, engagement is more of getting people involved in a continuous sort of participation in activities, whereas recognition seems like it's an after the fact sort of activity once somebody has been engaged. But I see in some of your presentation, these terms are a little bit confounded. So I was wondering if you could explain concisely the difference between engagement and recognition.
Raquel, if you'll allow me to boldly respond and say, it sounds like you have a perfect understanding of the difference between those two. Yeah, I look at, I often think, I'm not a card player, I'm not a poker player, but yet the analogy that always comes into my mind when I think about engagement is I'm taking my hands like this and then just pushing all of the chips toward the middle of the table. This idea of being all in, where your heart is really in the game, that for me is engagement. And all of us, every one of you is engaged in something. There's something that you're really excited about. And for me, that's what engagement is. I speak a lot with our collegiate men who I support. I work with 1,500 collegiate men, and I talk a lot about how do we create a culture of engagement? How in some way touching the work of the organization. And I believe that that's a calling for all of you in your branches as well, is that you should be figuring out what is it that this person really wants to do? What is their unique skill or gift? In what ways do they want to make a contribution? And then help them to get aligned with doing something that helps them to become engaged. So they're not just hanging out, but yet they're all in, because their time and their talent and ideally their treasures as well, all of that follows with that engagement piece. You are correct, Raquel, in that recognition is something that really happens after performance has been observed. And it really is a call for a leader to just take the extra time to say, hey, I noticed that you did this. And when you did that, this is what happened as a result. And for anybody who's picked up the book, you'll see that there's a feedback model that's in the book, and it's really simple to follow. We talk about behavior, describing the behavior, and then describing the impact of that behavior, and then encouraging a repeat performance. Pretty simple model to follow, but it really helps leaders to find their words, to be able to craft a sentence or two that helps to catch somebody in the act of doing something great that you would like to see them continue to do. So I think you got a really solid understanding of both of those concepts. Hopefully this description helped to round that out.
It does, and I'm wondering if anyone if you Barry, or anyone on the leadership team has ideas for recognition, because I think that's what is lacking a little bit is how do we recognize? And you said, well, maybe we don't have a Western themed luncheon, but what are some ways that as AAUW leaders, we can recognize our members.
Yeah, and Lorraine, I see your hand. Let me put you on mute to just minimize your audio, and then we'll come back to you in a moment. Lorraine, yeah, Raquel, here is the answer, and I've said this and I've ruffled feathers, so I'm going to say this delicately. There is nobody who has a better understanding of what recognition ideas are going to work best than the person who's receiving the recognition. They understand it because they know what's going on in here. I was hearing some conversation before this session started, where one of our leaders was sharing about, hey, they just started applying this very simple volunteers first principle of, I was asking people questions to get to know them. And here's what I have found is that most people, a high percentage of people, are really in tune with their intrinsic motivations. But if you ask them, so what are your intrinsic motivations?
Right.
They're probably not going to be able to give you a cogent answer. But if you find more artful ways to be able to ask that question, like and there's a multitude of ways to approach that. People are pretty in tune with what's going on in their heart. So that's always my answer whenever I hear, hey, let's generate 101 fancy ideas for recognition. Instead, I'm like, why don't we just take the time to ask the person who we desire to recognize? And maybe they can give us the insight that we need.
Peggy?
I wanted to say, Raquel, that I did what Barry says, he doesn't like to do, but during a little orientation, I did ask people on a sheet of paper, how do you like to be recognized? And I'm not kidding. This is what people said. And I had a little suggestions because as well as other or whatever. And I want to tell you, 90% of them said, all I want is a thank you. And one of I think one or two of them said it would be neat to be a named gift honoree. And that's where, of course, we all know what that is for Barry's information. We select based on donations, the number of donations. We select people that have done, commendable things in our branch for the year. But I found that very, very interesting. And so I asked Barry in a conversation, now what do I do with that? And he said, honor it. If that's how they want you to just say thank you. One woman said, I don't want any recognition. Please do not recognize. And so we're just kind of regrouping mentally with that. So I just thought you might find that kind of interesting. It really should be asked, I think.
So Barry, there's a comment here that a verbal thank you goes a long way. And handwritten notes are very well received, no matter what the generation. That's not something that younger generations are particularly aware of, but AAUW sends every member a set of note cards every year because those note cards have the painting on them that a member has won the right to have on these note cards. It's through a contest. So they're perfect to use to send somebody a thank you note for doing something they've done in AAUW.
I also wanted to mention for the group that this session and the slides and the narrative will all be also online underneath as session 2, underneath the first session, which did include a lot of details on support and connection. I mean, it's not connection. This is support and recognition. The first session was care and connect. So that might be useful for those of you who have not heard the first session to go
Right.
through it. And feel free to use those slides and these slides also in the same way Becky did.
So Barry, Lorraine has wanted to say something, so please go ahead, Lorraine. You're on mute.
I keep unmuting because somebody said unmute, please, and then it gets muted again. Okay, well, I'm a rather new member to AAUW. I belong to a lot of other organizations during the past, but so I am now the membership chair for the La Mesa El Cajon chapter. And somebody who had been a longtime member said to me, well, you know, in the past, we've recognized people who have been members for 5 years or 10 years or 15 years with a pin. I said, oh, really? I've never seen anybody wearing one of those pins, but I guess we could do something like that. And I thought about it and I said, you know, I can put little jewels on your name tag that represents 5 years that are blue, or 10 years and I add a green one, and 15 years I add a red one, and 25 years I can add a gold one, and in 50 years I can add silver for 25, gold for 50. And people on the board said, well, that sounds like a good idea. So I went through and looked at those people who reached those milestones this year and called them and told them we were going to recognize them and I was going to glue jewels on their name badges. And they thought that was terrific. And then other people were saying, well, I didn't get a jewel and I've been here more than 10 years or more than 15 years. I said, okay, in the future, at the next meeting, I will catch everybody up because this is the first year we're doing that. And why I think this is a good idea is because when we're those people, the third of the group who come to the monthly meetings, and we sit at a table, you have something to talk about with somebody that you might not know very well. You can say, my goodness, I see you've been a member for 15 years. Tell me about how you got involved. Or I see you're a rather new member. And so I think it'll be a good thing for our group, and it might be something other branches might want to try.
So Lorraine, you know, AAUW does have some of those pins.
Yes, and nobody wears them, and they're separate from their name badge.
No, they're supposed to be put on their name badges.
Are they? How would they be put on? Glued on?
Yeah, well, some of them are glued on, some of them poke through if the name badge is, you know, paper inside plastic, etc. But I just thought I'd point that out. And another comment in the chat was a public specific thank you in the branch newsletter. Could also be an appreciation. Most branches publish their newsletters monthly or bi-monthly.
And Sharon, could you review for people the branch tools page and where to look for the recordings, the
Okay.
narrative, the slides?
So I didn't have my website up.
That's okay, just talk about it.
Okay. So when you go onto the AAUW California website, which is aauw-ca.org, and you look at the banner across the very top, all the words across the very top, and there's something that says branch tools. Click on that and scroll down, and there are a million pieces of information for you all. And what you will find is we are recorded under the peer groups under, I think Sigrid is doing that for us.
Yeah. So you click
So you
here
see,
on peer groups. And then
and
you
then you
choose
come
your
down,
peer group.
come
Go
down to
ahead.
branch development, and you click there, and then you can get into all of the slides, all of the recordings, every wonderful word that Barry has offered us and Peggy has given us with regard to how to do this, how to get the hearts of your volunteers to be engaged.
And this will be posted in this location. It'll be Volunteers First Part 2 in about a week, as soon as our communications team can put that together.
And if you have not gone through the branch tools section of the website, there are at least a dozen little boxes. And there's more information than you can use in any one branch, but
Right.
it's definitive everywhere. As Patricia was talking about the branch activity of the year, all of the winners are posted there. So if you're looking for program ideas, pull up some of those ideas and just borrow them. You don't have to invent the wheel.
Oh, and a real important thing is all of you branch presidents have received your email about updating the BOR, which is the branch office report with your new officers. And you have to do that before July 1st or your authorization goes away. So make a memo to get in there and do both national and state. National will send you an individual email. State did too, but if you've lost the state one, you can go into the branch office report here. And when we're
They're
talking about
separate.
yeah, they're two separate things. You have
Yeah.
to do two. And when we're talking about the marketplace of where to buy those pins, that's here, branch marketplace. That's also where you can buy the past president's pins. Okay,
But
we
as you
done
can
with that?
see, there's more information than you will use in
Right,
one term of your administration.
and here's public policy, fundraising guidelines, especially the financial ones and what we can and cannot do. This is a wonderful page and it gives you everything you need to know to run your branch. Thanks, Sharon. Okay, any
Sigrid,
other questions? Yeah, oh,
yeah, Sigrid, this is Becky. Oh, you've got Nancy. Let Nancy go first with her question.
Nancy Turner, yeah, there we go.
Hi, well, it's not really a question, it's more of a comment. I've been a member for over 40 years. And when I joined because my mother invited me to go hear Gloria Steinem speak at a convention. And it's been so long that the younger members, I always have to ask if they know who Gloria Steinem is, and a lot of them don't. So what I felt when I walked into my first event was there was a room full of hundreds of women that looked like they were a sea of white hair and dresses. And that was not me. And I immediately looked at the differences. But what I found was that women in AAUW supported the things that I supported. And part of the issue that I think we have now, although it's so helpful that we can all meet like this on Zoom, that personal engagement and connection that you have at a live event, whether it's a one-day convention or a weekend away or regional events or programs, we have lost that due to the cost. You know, it's just so expensive, but it makes such a difference to me over the years that I was able to meet people that encouraged me, that shared their ideas about programs, about fundraising, about just all kinds of things. And it also brought me into the realm of serving on state committees because I met people that were serving at the state level. It encouraged me in continuing to support the AAUW mission. So I try and bring that into my branch. And I do, and I succeed at that, but I can't do that all by myself. And I would really love AAUW California leadership to consider trying to have something live, even if it's, you know, Northern California and Southern California. I loved meeting people from other parts of the state, but you get a different connection if you can just hang out with somebody while you're standing in line in the bathroom and start talking to them about where you want to go to dinner. So that's a comment, because the sea of white hair and dresses is still, you know, now we're in pants, but that generational disconnect still appears to people until you get a chance to connect with each other. Those circles of engagement that we have been talking about in these programs, the opportunity to really sit down and talk. So I really enjoyed this presentation. Thank you.
I appreciate that comment, Nancy. But as you know, fiscally, it's just not viable. California is too big a state. As I said, we have over 100 branches. And we were losing $30,000 from each convention. So that's not fiscally responsible.
Well, as I said, it wouldn't necessarily have to be a statewide event.
So we can ask you to be on the
Things that people
committee.
can look at. There are always options that can be considered. There are always choices that are possibilities.
And when I
Thank
meet
you.
with other branches, I do tell them to have joint events with other branches. Sometimes inter-branch council meetings or whatever, so that therefore you do have some personal connection that's regionally available.
And I understand that because I said I've been a member for a long time. I also live in an area now where I'm in the Central Valley. We're a little more spread out. We do have events with other local branches, but we don't have a whole lot of state leaders out in these areas, and even, it's like Mariposa is close, and close is considered it's over an hour away. So
Great. Becky wanted to talk a little bit about one other topic, Sharon.
Yes, one of the things that we had been asked for was some sample business cards that branches can use for outreach. And I put together a few different samples, which I put in the chat. So you can just download it and look at it later. You don't have to do anything with it right now. But just various samples, some with QR codes, some not, some with their social media profiles, etc. But again, it can be a template for you to use for your branch. So I'm just going to stick that in the chat and then you can just download it. Thanks.
Hey, do we have any other questions? No? Well, thank you all for sticking with us for an hour and a half this evening. We still have 29 people online. That's outstanding. Thank you so much to Barry and Peggy for the presentations this evening, and Sharon for leading our question and answer, and all of you for participating tonight. Have a good evening. Good night.